We walked into a church to stop their holy meal and prove they were wrong about Jesus. But why did something happen inside that room that none of us could explain? My name is Khalid, and I am 32 years old. The night that changed my life began with a plan that I believed was righteous. The air outside the church felt cool against my face as I stood on the sidewalk with 6 other men. The building rose above us, tall and quiet, like with bright glass windows glowing red and gold from the lights inside. Cars filled the parking lot. Families were still walking toward the doors, holding small children by the hand. Some people were laughing softly. Others walked quietly with heads bowed. They had no idea why we were there. My heart beat fast in my chest, not from fear, from purpose. I had spent my whole life believing that Islam was the final truth from God. I grew up in Cairo, Egypt, dosed in a narrow street filled with the sound of evening prayer calls and busy markets. When I was a boy, my father would wake me before sunrise. We would walk together to the mosque while the sky was still dark blue. The stone floor inside the mosque felt cold under my feet as I knelt beside him. The smell of old rugs and incense filled the room. My father was a respected teacher of Islamic law. People came to our home almost every week to ask him questions about faith. I remember sitting quietly in the corner as men with gray beards spoke with deep voices about God, truth, and obedience. When they noticed me listening, they would smile and say I would grow into a strong defender of the faith one day. Those words stayed with me. By the time I was 10 years old, I could recite long parts of the Quran from memory. My father's voice guided me every night as we studied together at the kitchen table under a dim yellow light. If I made a mistake, he corrected me gently but firmly. Truth must be guarded, he would say. Never let it be changed. As I grew older, those lessons became the center of my life. In school, I argued with teachers about religion. When classmates spoke about Christianity, I felt a fire rise inside me. I believed they were following a path that had lost the pure message of God. That belief only grew stronger when I moved to the United States for university. The city was loud and bright and full of people from many cultures. Church buildings stood beside coffee shops and bookstores. Crosses hung from necklaces around people's necks. To many students, religion seemed like a small part of life. But to me, faith was everything. During my first semester, I met a group of Muslim students who felt the same way I did. We gathered often in a small apartment near campus. The living room smelled of strong tea and cardamom. Shoes lined the wall near the door. We sat close together on the floor and spoke late into the night about faith and truth. Many of us believed Islam was misunderstood in the West. We also believed Christianity had changed the message of God over time. Our talks were serious and intense. Sometimes voices rose, sometimes fists tapped the floor as someone made a strong point. But there was one Christian practice that troubled us more than any other: communion. The idea that Christians gathered to eat bread and drink wine while saying it was the body and blood of Jesus confused and angered us. To us, God was one, pure and far above such things. The thought that God could become human seemed impossible. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the apartment windows, the talk turned heated again. A man named Farid leaned forward and placed his cup on the table with a soft clink. His eyes were bright with energy. "They are having a communion service this Sunday," he said. "A big one, open to the public." The room grew quiet. "What if we went?" someone asked. Farid nodded slowly. "Not to sit quietly," he said, "to challenge them." My chest tightened as I listened. He continued speaking. "We could stand up during the ritual and ask them questions, real questions, in front of everyone." The idea spread through the room like a spark through dry leaves. Some men looked unsure. The others leaned forward with growing excitement. I remember the moment I spoke. "If we believe they are wrong," I said slowly, "then we should not stay silent." The words felt strong and certain as they left my mouth. Soon the plan was clear. We would walk into the church service together. We would wait until the communion ritual began. Then we would stand and speak the truth as we understood it. Someone suggested filming the moment on a phone so we could share it online later. Another man nodded and said the video could reach thousands of people. The more we talked, the more right it felt. We were not attacking anyone, we told ourselves. We were simply defending the truth of God. 2 days later, Sunday arrived. The sky above the city glowed orange as the sun began to sink behind tall buildings. The air carried the smell of fresh rain on pavement. Our group met in the parking lot of a small grocery store before driving together to the church. During the ride, no one laughed or joked. The mood was serious. I looked out the window at passing streets as my mind replayed the plan again and again. When we arrived, the church stood at the corner of a quiet street. It was larger than I expected, built from pale stone that looked almost golden in the evening light. Tall glass windows showed bright colors inside. Through the doors, we could hear music. Soft singing drifted into the parking lot. Families walked up the steps toward the entrance. A man in a dark jacket held the door open and greeted people with a warm smile. For a moment, something inside me hesitated. These people did not look like enemies. They looked peaceful. But Farid stepped beside me and whispered, "Remember why we came?" I nodded slowly. We walked toward the doors. The sound of the singing grew louder as we stepped inside. Warm air wrapped around us. The floor beneath our shoes was smooth polished wood. Long rows of benches stretched toward the front where candles flickered beside a table covered in white cloth. The room smelled faintly of wax and old wood. Hundreds of people filled the seats. Some closed their eyes as they sang. Others raised their hands gently in the air. I felt many eyes turn toward us as we walked down the aisle together. My heartbeat grew louder in my ears. At the front of the room stood a middle-aged pastor holding a silver tray. His voice was calm and clear as he spoke. "Tonight we remember the love of Christ," he said softly. The tray in his hands held small pieces of bread. Beside him stood a table with small cups filled with red liquid. This was the moment we had come for. I looked at Farid. He gave a small nod. My hands felt cold. I stepped forward into the center aisle. The pastor had just begun to lift the bread when Farid suddenly raised his voice. "Stop!" The word struck the quiet room like thunder. The singing stopped. Every head turned. The pastor lowered the bread slowly, and as hundreds of people stared at us in shock, I opened my mouth to speak the challenge we had planned. But standing there in that silent church, with candlelight flickering across the walls and the smell of bread in the air, I had no idea that the next hour would begin breaking apart everything I believed about God. Have you ever stepped into a place believing you were about to prove others wrong, only to discover something there was waiting to challenge you instead? The old church bell rang one slow note that rolled through the room like a deep breath. I stood near the back with the others, my hands cold even though the hall was warm. The smell of bread filled the air. Soft music played from a small piano near the front. Candles flickered on a wooden table where the communion trays rested. The room looked calm, but my chest felt tight. The man leading our group leaned close to me and whispered, "When they lift the bread, that is when we move." I nodded, but my throat felt dry. My eyes moved across the room. Families sat together in quiet rows. A young boy swung his feet under a bench. A woman held her baby close. An old man bowed his head and prayed. I told myself this was all wrong. I told myself they were lost people. That is what I had believed for years. But something felt strange inside me tonight. The pastor stepped forward. He held a small plate with broken bread. His voice was calm and soft. "This bread reminds us of love that was given for us." I felt my heart beat faster. The leader of our group raised 2 fingers. That was the signal. 5 of us began to walk forward. The sound of our boots on the wooden floor broke the quiet. Heads turned. Some people gasped. The pastor froze for a moment, but did not move away. Our leader stepped ahead of me and shouted, "Stop this false worship!" The room went silent. The piano stopped. A baby began to cry. My chest burned as every eye turned toward us. The leader kicked one of the communion trays. Metal clanged loudly across the floor. Bread scattered across the wood. The sound echoed through the church. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh God." The leader pointed at the pastor. "This is a lie. Your book is corrupted." My hands shook. This was the moment we had planned. We were supposed to shout, record the chaos, and shame them. But the pastor did something strange. He did not shout. He did not call the police. He slowly stepped down from the platform and walked toward us. Each step creaked softly on the old floor. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. He looked directly at me, not at our leader, at me. His eyes were calm, not angry, not afraid, just sad. He bent down and picked up a small piece of bread from the floor. Then he gently placed it back on the table. "You are welcome here," he said quietly. The words felt like a punch to my chest. Our leader laughed loudly. "Welcome. We came to expose you." The pastor nodded slowly. "I know." The calm in his voice made the room even quieter. A woman near the front began to pray under her breath. Our leader pulled out his phone to film. "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them this ritual is pagan." The pastor looked at the camera for a moment. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "Tonight you came to break this service," he said softly. "But maybe God brought you here for something else." My stomach twisted. God! I felt heat rise in my face. Our leader slammed his hand on the communion table. Cups rattled and juice spilled across the white cloth. "Do not speak about God to us." The pastor did not move. The room felt heavy, like the air had turned thick. I noticed something then. No one in the church looked angry. Many looked afraid, but most of them were praying. One man stood slowly and began to sing a quiet hymn. Others joined him. Soft voices filled the room. The sound wrapped around us like a slow wave. Our leader shouted over them, "Stop singing!" But they kept singing. My heart began to pound harder. Something about the sound made my chest ache. I looked down at the bread on the floor again. One small piece sat near my shoe. Without thinking, I bent down and picked it up. It felt warm in my hand. I did not know why, but my eyes burned. Our leader grabbed my shoulder. "What are you doing?" I quickly dropped the bread. "Nothing," I muttered. The pastor watched me again. He stepped closer. Now he stood only a few feet away. I could see the lines on his face. I could see the gray in his beard. "You look troubled," he said softly. My stomach twisted again. "I am not troubled," I snapped. But my voice shook. The singing grew louder behind him. The pastor held a small cup of juice in his hand. "This meal is about forgiveness," he said. Our leader scoffed. "We do not need your forgiveness." The pastor's eyes moved back to me. "But sometimes," he said quietly, "a heart begins to change before a mind understands." Those words sent a chill down my back. How could he see that? I felt exposed, like someone had opened a door inside my chest. I stepped back. "No," I whispered. Our leader raised his voice again, trying to regain control. "We came here to stop this." But the church kept singing, soft, calm, steady. And suddenly I felt something I had not felt in many years. Peace. It scared me. I clenched my fists. Why did this place feel different than I expected? Why did their calm make my anger feel weak? And why did the pastor keep looking at me like he knew something I did not? The singing did not stop. It filled the church like a soft wave, rising and falling. Some voices were strong, some were weak and shaking, but they kept singing. I stood frozen in the middle of the aisle. My heart beat hard in my chest. Our leader shouted again, louder this time, "Enough! Stop this now!" But the people did not stop. A gray-haired woman in the front row closed her eyes and lifted her hands as she sang. A small boy beside her tried to follow the words, his voice thin and unsure. The sound should have made me angry. Instead, it made something twist inside me. I tried to shake the feeling away. This is wrong, I told myself. This is deception. But the peace in the room made my thoughts feel weak. Our leader pushed past me and walked straight toward the pastor. His boots hit the floor hard with every step. "You think singing will stop us?" he yelled. The pastor stood still. The candlelight danced across his face. "No," he said gently, "but love might." The word love made our leader laugh. "Love?" he mocked. "You worship a weak God." The pastor shook his head slowly. "No," he said, "we worship a God who gave everything." The singing grew louder. I felt the floor vibrate slightly under my feet as more voices joined in. Our leader grabbed one of the communion cups and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and spilled red juice down the white paint. Gasps filled the air. I waited for anger to explode in the crowd, but it did not. Instead, the singing continued. That scared me more than shouting would have. Our leader turned to us. His eyes were burning. "Record this," he ordered. One of the men beside me lifted his phone and started filming. I felt sweat run down my back. The pastor slowly stepped forward again. He stopped only a few feet from me. Up close, his eyes looked tired but kind. He pointed to the bread still lying on the floor near the table. "That bread reminds us of a body that was broken," he said softly. Our leader scoffed loudly. "We do not care about your ritual." The pastor nodded once. "I know," he said, "but I care about you." The words hit me like a stone. Care about us? Why would he care about men who came to destroy his service? My chest tightened again. The singing behind him shifted into a new hymn. The melody was slow and deep. I felt the sound in my ribs. Our leader stepped closer to the pastor until they stood face to face. You think we came here to listen? He growled. The pastor looked calm. No, he said, but maybe you came here to be seen. Those words made my stomach twist. Seen? I felt like he was looking straight through me. Our leader raised his hand as if he might shove the pastor. The room went still. Even the singing softened. For a moment, I thought something terrible would happen. But the pastor did not step back. Instead, he quietly held out a small cup of communion juice. Tonight, this cup means forgiveness, he said. Our leader stared at it like it was poison. Take that away, he snapped. But the pastor did not move. He turned slightly and looked at me again. Not at our leader, at me. You picked up the bread, he said gently. My heart jumped. How did he notice that? I dropped it, I muttered quickly. The pastor nodded. But you still touched it. My hands began to shake again. The singing grew louder behind him. I could hear the words clearly now, words about mercy, words about grace. I clenched my jaw. Stop listening, I told myself. Our leader turned toward me, his face dark with anger. Why are you quiet? He demanded. I'm not, I said quickly, but my voice sounded small. The pastor spoke again, his voice soft but clear. Sometimes truth starts with one small moment, he said. Our leader laughed harshly. There is no truth here. The pastor slowly lifted the bread from the table. He held it in both hands. This bread reminds us that Jesus gave his life for enemies, he said. The word enemies echoed in my head. Enemies. That was what we were. We came here to shame them, to humiliate them, to break their service, and yet they were praying for us. I looked around the room again. No one looked hateful. Some looked scared. Some had tears in their eyes, but many were still singing, still praying. Our leader slammed his fist on the table again. This ends now, he shouted. The loud bang made several people jump. The pastor looked at him calmly. No, he said quietly. This began long before tonight. Our leader's face twisted in anger. Enough of this, he growled. He turned toward the rest of us. We leave, he ordered, but my feet would not move. The pastor's words echoed in my head. You picked up the bread. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking. Why did that small piece of bread feel so heavy in my memory? Why did the peace in this room feel stronger than our anger? And why did I suddenly feel like something inside me was starting to break? Our leader turned toward the door and waved his hand. Move, he ordered. Two of the men beside me started walking out right away. Their boots hit the floor fast and hard. The door at the back creaked as one of them pushed it open. Cold night air slipped into the church, but I did not move. My feet felt heavy, like they were stuck to the wooden floor. Our leader noticed. He turned back and frowned at me. Why are you still standing there? I swallowed. I'm coming, I said, but my legs still did not move. Behind the pastor, the singing slowly faded into quiet prayer. The room felt calm again, but my chest felt like a storm. The pastor gently set the bread back on the table. Then he did something I did not expect. He pulled out a chair and sat down, right there in front of us, like he had all the time in the world. Our leader stared at him with disbelief. You think this is a game? He snapped. The pastor shook his head. No, he said softly. This is a moment. The words made the room feel even heavier. Our leader stepped closer, anger sharp in his voice. You should be afraid right now. But the pastor simply folded his hands. I am not afraid of you, he said. Our leader leaned down his face inches away from the pastor. You should be. The pastor looked straight into his eyes. I am only afraid of missing the chance to show you grace. The word grace echoed in the room. I felt a strange pull in my chest again. Our leader straightened and laughed loudly. This is useless, he said. They are brainwashed. Then he pointed at me. You, he barked, we are leaving. Everyone looked at me again. My face felt hot. I tried to step forward, but when I lifted my foot, I saw something near the table. Another small piece of bread. It had fallen beside one of the chair legs. The sight of it froze me again. The pastor noticed my eyes. He stood slowly and picked up the bread. Then he held it out toward me. You are not forcing, just offering. My heart pounded. Our leader shouted, do not touch that. The room went silent again. I stared at the bread. It was small, no bigger than a coin, but it felt like the heaviest thing in the world. The pastor spoke softly. This bread is a sign of a body that was broken for the world. I shook my head quickly. I should not take it, I whispered. The pastor nodded gently. You are right, he said. That surprised me. But none of us deserve it, he continued. The words hung in the air. Behind him, a woman began to quietly pray again. I could hear her whisper, Lord, open hearts. Our leader stepped forward and grabbed my arm hard. Enough of this, he growled. We go now. Pain shot through my shoulder, but the pastor still held the bread toward me. His hand was steady. You came here tonight to break something, he said quietly. My chest tightened. But sometimes, he continued, God uses broken moments to reach a heart. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. I quickly blinked them away. Our leader pulled harder on my arm. Stop listening to him. But I could not look away. I stared at the bread, then at the pastor's face. He did not look proud. He did not look angry. He looked hopeful. Hopeful for me. That feeling scared me more than anything else tonight. Our leader shouted again. Move! I finally pulled my arm free. I just need a second, I said. His eyes widened in anger. You are forgetting who you are. Those words hit deep. Who I am. For years I knew exactly who I was. A man with a mission. A man who defended truth. A man who fought against what he believed was false. But tonight everything felt different. The church was quiet again. The candles flickered gently. The smell of bread and grape juice filled the air, and the pastor still held out the small piece of bread. Not forcing, just waiting. My hand slowly lifted. I stopped halfway. Fear rushed through me. If I touched it, what would that mean? Would I betray everything I believed? Would I lose the respect of the men behind me? Would I lose my place in the life I had built? Our leader's voice cut through the silence. If you take that, you walk away from us. The words felt like a blade. I looked back at him. His face was hard, no mercy, no patience, only anger. Then I looked back at the pastor. His face was calm, no pressure, only kindness. The bread waited between us. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The whole room watched. Even the small boy in the front row stared with wide eyes. I took a slow step forward. The wooden floor creaked. Our leader shouted my name again, but his voice sounded far away now. All I could see was the bread. All I could feel was the strange peace in this room. My fingers slowly reached out. They hovered just above the small piece of bread. One simple choice. One tiny moment. One step that could change everything. But if I touched it, What would happen to my life next? My fingers trembled as they moved the last inch. Then I touched the bread. It was soft and warm from the pastor's hand. A tiny piece, light as air. But the moment my skin touched it, my chest felt tight, like something deep inside me had cracked open. The room was silent. No one moved. I slowly took the bread from his hand. Behind me, I heard our leader shout my name. His voice was sharp with anger. Drop it! But I did not. I stared at the small piece resting in my palm. For years, I had mocked this moment. I had called it foolish. I had called it weak. Yet standing there, holding that bread, I did not feel weak. I felt seen. The pastor's voice came softly. Jesus gave his life even for those who hated him. My throat burned. I remembered the first bread I picked up from the floor earlier. I had dropped it quickly, afraid someone would see. But now everyone saw. The whole church watched me. I slowly lifted the bread. My heart pounded like a drum. Our leader stormed forward. His boots hit the floor fast. "If you eat that," he shouted, "you are finished with us." His words hung heavy in the air. Finished, cut off, alone. Fear rushed through me, but something stronger pushed through the fear. Peace, a quiet peace that had been growing inside me since the moment the singing started. I looked around the church. The people who should have hated us were praying. The people we came to shame were showing kindness. The pastor stood only a few feet away. His eyes were full of hope, not victory. That hope felt like light breaking through a dark room. My hands stopped shaking. Slowly, I placed the bread in my mouth. The room gasped softly. The bread tasted plain, dry, simple. But the moment I swallowed, tears filled my eyes. Not loud tears, just quiet ones that slipped down my face. Our leader stared at me like he did not know who I was anymore. "You betrayed us," he said coldly. I shook my head slowly. "No," I whispered. My voice was soft, but it felt strong. "I think I finally saw something tonight." The pastor gently placed a hand on my shoulder, not to claim me, just to stand beside me. Behind him, the church began singing again. Soft at first, then stronger, the same hymn from earlier. This time the sound did not scare me. It felt like warmth, like our leader turned away in anger and stormed out of the church. The door slammed hard behind him. The other men followed, but I stayed. I stood there in the quiet light of the candles, surrounded by people who had every reason to hate me. Yet no one did. The pastor handed me a small cup of juice. My hand trembled as I took it. "For forgiveness," he said softly. I closed my eyes for a moment. My whole life had changed in less than 1 hour. But deep inside, one question still echoed in my heart. If a single moment of grace could break years of hatred, how many other lives could change the same way?